So it's great to be here, and it's great to have you with us. One thing I'd like to do just right at the start, because you've probably been to a number of these, sat in chairs, and you've consumed of what is going on here, and boy, have we got some good things for you to consume. But we are a movement of change in this room, so I'd like you to take the biggest risk you've done today, and I'd like you to look either to left or right, or even more excitingly, in front and behind, and see if you can introduce yourself to someone you've never met before in your life, and find out why they're in this session. So here you are, 5 minutes to make some new contacts. Take the ultimate risk. Peter Woodward. An independent expert.
I used to be in the commission.
I wonder why you are now smiling, because you are no longer in the commission. So do you provide consultancy, or?
What?
You provide consultancy?
Well, I'm retired and I do a bit of consultancy, but I only do things I like.
And what was your field when you were?
I work mainly in two fields: water quality.
Yes.
Marine, fresh water, and air quality, transport, climate change.
Right.
So,
and are you?
I see financing.
Right.
As probably, as a huge political hurdle.
Yeah.
We see in all the elections, all those looking back.
Yeah.
And those looking ahead, and those in the countryside looking back, those in the cities, or some of them at least, looking ahead. And how are you going to persuade the people who are looking back to invest?
Yeah, because looking back feels safe.
Yeah.
No, low risk, they think.
Yeah.
Interesting. And sitting as you do, having had a long experience of this, are you feeling excited that we are getting to grips with all the issues and we are turning the tanker round into a exciting future, or are we way off?
Slow.
Right.
Very, very slow.
Right. Okay.
The one thing that you can ask is, are we turning it fast enough?
Right. Yes. And maybe find. Oh, well, that's we need a few more people like that to for the European thing. Oh well, enjoy the. I'll know where to come. Thank you. Okay. Fantastic. If we could gently come back together. Okay, I think we've decided that me and the speakers are going to go back in the green room. You just got enough energy in this room without us, but maybe on this panel, I've got some people to offer some drops of thought, wisdom, and possibility about sustainable financing. Just interested, has anyone just made a new contact in this last moment? Someone they've never met before in their life? Fantastic. Okay. If you haven't, you could move. All right. Interested. Dare I ask whether anyone's made a contact they think that's quite an interesting person? Yeah. Quite a... Cheat question. Okay. But all I can say is this afternoon we have got some great presentations to offer you some content, but I do want to encourage some conversation, some interaction within the constraints of our 90 minutes. There are two ways to do it. We'll have breathing points where you can ask a question of clarification or a comment or something, and we'll have some conversation towards the end. There's also this wonderful, if you're into apps, you will be in app heaven. Connects Me. Who is on Connects Me? Look at that. Yeah. It's right. Our sustainable future is semi-guaranteed by people engaging with smart. Okay, but if you want to connect, we're in room 5.3. Ask a question, make a comment. I'll keep an eye on this, and I can use that a little bit to lubricate our conversation. The last thing is, if English is not your native language, but you happen to prefer a little bit of French or German, then there are headsets. And there are wonderful translators for us. So, or if you just want to know what sustainable finance sounds like in German, then it's just quite fun. Okay, so that's enough of that. What the plan for this afternoon? Clearly, huge issue. We are talking about nothing short of revolution, disruption, transformation of our cities towards a sustainable future. In the city holds the key as to whether humankind can get it, work it out, move it forward. Every pressure, issue, problem, challenge is manifest in the city, right from feeding, energy, communicating, mobility, air we breathe, health, they're all there. If we are going to make that transformation, it doesn't just happen, it is lubricated by finance. People invest in the change. Tram systems do not just arrive, they actually have to be installed. All change costs money. Someone has to make a choice and a decision to do that. Is finance one of the biggest blockages to the transformation? As they say, we have the technology, it's applying it, it's making it work that is the challenge. This afternoon, I've got four wonderful speakers offering different perspectives who are going to throw into the pot some approaches, programs that are helping to deliver that change. We hope that you will find those in themselves interesting. After each one, a couple of moments, questions of clarification if you want to, or you can ask a question via the app. And then what we're going to do is, having heard those four stories, those interventions, we're going to say, okay, does this add up? Is this making sense? What more needs to be done to take us towards that sustainable future? So I am going to plunge straight in. We've got a couple of presentations. Obviously, the European Commission, with its drive around sustainable cities, is very much interested in this area, and a number of programs and activities that support transformation. So we've got a couple of presentations from different areas of the Commission. And first of all, I'm delighted that we're joined by Maja Mikoszinska, who's Head of Sector, Climate Change, Life Programme, IASME, which is the Executive Agency for Small, Medium-Sized Enterprises at the European Commission. You have your fingers in a number of very exciting pots that are part of the transformation. Maja, great to have you with us, and interesting to hear what you'd like to share with our participants. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. Yes, there's a presentation. So they say a picture says more than 1,000 words, and I think a good concrete example of a project says more about the funding instrument than a very long PowerPoint presentation with several bullet points on eligibility criteria. So today I will share with you examples of the projects that we finance that are implemented either in cities or by cities. And I would, to give you just a bit of a flavor of the vast opportunities that are offered by LIFE funding instrument, but I would also like to use the excuse of those projects to share with you what I see as some of the key ingredients for a successful response to challenges faced by cities today. But before I get to that, just to make sure that we are all on the same page, and for those of you that might not be familiar with the program I'm representing today, LIFE is the EU funding instrument for environment and climate action. And last year it celebrated 25 years of its existence. And in the quarter of a century since it's been around, LIFE co-finance projects in cities of different sizes, different demographics, different geographical locations, responding to challenges as diverse as air pollution, waste, water issues, biodiversity, noise, climate change adaptation, etc. So whatever the environmental or climate challenge a city is facing, chances are that it might be possible to receive support from life to address them. So I mentioned in the beginning I would like to share with you a couple of examples of the projects we supported. And the first one is from Italy. It's implemented by Commune Padova, Venezia and Treviso, among others, although there are several others. And the project was born after a violent wave of bad weather a couple of years ago. And as a result, cities such as Padova or Verona were affected by serious flooding. And the identification of mitigation and adaptation strategies became a priority that resulted in a live project that we support today. The project will deliver 43 climate adaptation plans, including for 3 provincial capital cities, which will encompass more than 1 million inhabitants. But it will also overall result in the improved resilience to flooding in the project area. It will also deliver integrated land management systems with inclusion of vulnerabilities, risks, and adaptation measures, and the alarm systems. And I like to refer to this project because it stresses the importance of the vision or of a strategy, if you prefer, to tackle environmental and climate changes in a sustainable way. It's really a starting point for, in my opinion, for any response. But the vision is, of course, one thing, but translating it into reality is a completely different story. And making it happen requires, of course, taking a concrete action. And here what I see actually as another important ingredient of successful response is a very good partnership. Of course, any project, especially the ones that we finance, can be implemented by a single entity. There is nothing wrong with that. But there are definitely benefits to building a strong, solid project partnership and involving partners in from different sectors or stakeholders with very specific expertise. This very often tends to bring innovation to the project or very original outside-the-box solutions. And in life, we have actually several examples of very interesting and good partnerships. I will mention just a couple of them. A couple of years ago, we have financed a project implemented by City of Warsaw in a partnership with an NGO. The project was aiming at protecting or supporting the biodiversity in the city. It resulted in the restoration of several types of habitats along the banks of the river. It's created floating islands. But it also created infrastructures for the citizens, for the inhabitants of the city, so that they too can enjoy and access the river in a sustainable way. So here is an example, for instance, of a local authority, of a partnership of a local authority with an NGO. But we have also examples of partnerships between cities and private sector. For example, in Paris, we have a project that is implemented by the city of Paris in collaboration with 2 private commercial companies and an NGO, if I'm not mistaken. And this project aims to tackle the problem of traffic noise and urban heat island effect by developing 3 new types of asphalt surface. And this substance will have certain properties that will reduce, on one hand, noise pollution and mitigate temperature rises in the city. Another example comes from city of Rotterdam, and actually we have more than 1 project implemented currently in Rotterdam. And it's a very interesting project in itself. The one that I'm referring to is focusing on the construction of the green roofs and green facades, actually of including green roofs and green facades to address the problem of the limited urban space to implement adaptation strategies. And actually, the project in itself is a very interesting story that would take a long time. But what I would like to mention just about this particular project, and I hope the beneficiaries would forgive me that I mentioned just a tiny aspect of it, is that the project to boost the innovation will provide actually the roof space for experimental technologies and will organize a design contest for multifunctional roofs. So it also shows that you don't always have to limit yourself to a project partnership to look for the innovation. It's possible to look also for it outside the project partnership, and that is also a good pathway as long as it helps to boost innovation and find a sustainable solution. So these are really just a few examples, and the one feature of LIFE that I always like to stress is the fact that it's really a very open program. It's open to very many different entities, different actors. Some of them may not always necessarily be associated with environmental or climate work directly, but as long as their contribution to the project is required to achieve these objectives, we are more than happy to include them in the project. So I have mentioned sound strategies, great partnerships, and innovative solutions as what I see as some of the important ingredients. Unfortunately, sometimes this is not enough. And this brings me to my final point, which is funding. The challenges that we collectively face, unfortunately, cannot be always resolved by a single grant or a single project. And we recognize this challenge, and therefore the European Commission since 2014 introduced a new category of projects that are designed the new category of the projects that is designed to address this problem to a certain extent. They are known here as the integrated projects, and they are designed to implement specific EU policies or actually plans and strategies required by specific EU legislations, notably waste management plans or quality plans, prioritized action frameworks for Natura 2000, etc., etc. So the two key features of these projects are, on one hand, the very strong stakeholder involvement, but on the other hand, these projects are required to mobilize additional funding in order to implement the measures that are necessary to reach the full implementation of the plan or a strategy that is targeted by the project. And I mention it in the context of the cities because, in fact, we have currently 26 of those projects, and many of them actually are benefiting different cities. We have, for example, a project implemented here in Belgium, which is aiming to create conditions for a full implementation of the strategic housing renovation plans of Flanders and Wallonia regions. And the objective is, in fact, to increase the energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So the strategies cover more than 4 million households in Belgium, but the project itself, on one hand, will contain demonstration actions that will be implemented in dwellings in Ghent, Antwerp, Mechelen, Mouscron and La Louvière. But on the other hand, it will also mobilize additional funding. In case of this project, it's, I think, more than 700 million euros. That will help to implement fully the strategies in at the full scale, and thus reaching the other households as well. And the complementary funding for these additional measures come both from national and EU funding, as well as private entities. So these are just a couple of examples I wanted to share with you and to show that LIFE, that very often actually is associated with maybe nature and biodiversity, is in fact a program that can be very well used in the cities and by the cities. And it's done with a great deal of success in 25 years history of LIFE. And since we are in a very special time of the year where we have opened the call for proposals, I would like to just mention that we are waiting for good ideas of projects. And we have several calls open currently. So this is our current opportunity to secure some funding for sustainable cities. You might be interested to know that we have actually simplified recently the procedure for applying for projects under environment priority area. And this call closes in June, and the one for climate action closes in September on the 12th. That is all. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. Just see whether, as a very specific fund and approach, just see whether anyone's got a specific question of clarification before I'm going to move on to some more funding approaches available from the Commission. Can I ask you a question? These are attractive and large numbers, but they're still tiny. I can probably build about a kilometre of tram line with some of those numbers. Do you kind of see the LIFE funds? They're not going to fill the funding gap. Are they more ways of experimenting and trying things and building new partnerships and creating momentum rather than being a fundamental funder of change in cities? How do you view the LIFE funds?
Is this on?
Yep.
Yes. Hello?
Believe and it'll happen. Yeah, just keep talking
all
and
right.
it'll all, yeah. Yeah, say something uninteresting for the first sentence, and then the second sentence you'll be there.
I have only interesting things to say.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yes, all right. So, no, it's actually a very good question because indeed, LIFE funding, LIFE budget overall is actually relatively small, and especially if we look at it in the context of the larger EU budget. And what we very often like to refer to LIFE is we consider it to be a catalyzer. And so we expect it to catalyze, to start some processes and catalyze some changes that will bring a wider impact.
Right.
And with this regard, we actually, so definitely it's not a program for just, as you mentioned, implementing solutions. I mean, we pay a lot of attention to the transfer and replication of the results. So we expect that applicants would actually consider these elements already when preparing their proposals. And we also see LIFE, and actually very often it plays the very integrative role. It brings together stakeholders that very often would have never met and starts processes that very often result in actions beyond individual projects.
Okay, yeah. All right, thank you for that. Did anyone just want to ask a specific question of clarification around LIFE and what Maya has said? Okay, I'm going to move on because you've raised some bigger points around partnership and issues around innovation, risk, all the rest of it, which will open up the conversation. But I'd like to go open or knock on another door within the Commission. The Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy, major funding around the cohesion policy area. Delighted we're joined by Francesco Amodio, who's from the Inclusive Growth, Urban and Territorial Development area of that. Clearly, cities and city transformation is a big part of that cohesion policy. Very interesting to hear one or two thoughts from you about how that can be mobilized to be the driver of transformation.
Thank you, Peter. So my is open?
It is.
Yeah, okay. In my intervention, I would like to refer to three things. The first thing is an initiative that we have dedicated for innovation in cities. The second is about the issue of funding that they will be covered by the following speaker. And then the third is about moral methodology, how we see the role of cities changing in this programming period. So the first thing that I want to refer is the Urban Innovative Action. The Urban Innovative Action is a new initiative that we started in this programming period. He has quite a significant budget, it's 370 million, and the objective is to help the cities to test innovative solutions. Innovative in the sense that we call this the urban lab, meaning that for a number of challenges that cities face, and these challenges are all kinds. There are from the inclusion of integration of migrant and refugees to urban poverty, but also challenges which relate to environment, like the circular economy, climate adaptations. What we give is an amount of 5 million euro, up to 5 million euro, to these cities to really test on the ground the implementation of our solutions. If the solution succeeds or fails, is not an issue for us. The important that we can learn from these solutions. Usually these projects are led by cities which has a size of at least 50,000 inhabitants. But the design of this project, as was mentioned by Maya, is co-designed with local stakeholders. So we don't request that you create this project in cooperation with other cities, but we want that you create this solution with the local actors which are present in the place. This can be a university that can help you to measure the results, but can also private sector, NGO, whoever are feasible and adapt to the solutions. So far we launched 3 calls, and the previous call we had the circular economy in our one of the topics, and we select 8 cities. This comes from Belgium, from Slovenia, from Finland, Spain. And for each of these cities, we create one journal where you can really follow the progress. Because the objective is to learn. The budget is limited in the sense that we receive a lot of applications and the success rate is less than 6%. So it means the solution, which was never tested before in Europe, in the EU, can be used and transferred to other cities. So we have the first call, circular economy. Today we are assessing the proposal for the third call, and in this call we have around 40 proposals for climate adaptation and 35 proposals from air quality. In October, during the European Week of Regions and Cities, we will announce the winner, and then we will follow this project that we have 3 years' time, so a very short time, to implement this solution. And on this, I just want to say that Eduard, which is from the Secretary of the Urban Innovative Action, is a -1, so you can ask him every detailed information you need, how to apply, how this initiative works. So profit of his present downstairs. The second thing that I want to mention is that we are recognized that cities have difficulty to finance their project. These are in the social area, in the environmental area. So what we start a cooperation with the European Investment Bank, and we launch an advisory service. It's a pilot project which is called Urbis. What's the objective? The objective is to provide advice to a city which has either an investment program or some project and need to have advice on how to plan, how to design, how to monitor this project, but also what's the best option to implement this project. This advisory is free of charge for the cities, but and of course it cannot cover those which are really implementing issues like the procurement, the impact assessment, but really provide on the strategic point of view, on the technical side, but also on the financial side, how to finance, which is the best financial mechanism to implement. To apply, it's very easy. If you go to EIB Urbis, there is a very simple platform, 4 or 5 steps, and you will get your application reach the colleagues in EIB, which will take contact with you and come back to you to say, yes, how to proceed with this cooperation. So far, we started only in November, and we are already quite a number of cities participating. For example, Athens is working about resilient cities, how to adapt, face climate adaptation. Bologna is working on climate adaptation, and Milano start working on air quality. How to finance an air quality plan. So go into the Urbis website if you're really interested to apply for this instrument. Last things that I would like to mention is that these are very small initiatives. The huge amount of money is under the cohesion policies. And for your information, in the programming period 2014-2020, urban count for 100 billion euro. So 100 billion euro of projects are realized on urban area, which huge amount. Very huge amount. Of this, and this is the things that we particularly care about, is that 50 billion are managed through integrated urban development. So this is what my unit is working on. We are promoting solutions which are integrated, where the selection of the investment that our cities do is through an integrated strategy which covers many aspects together, and where there is behind a participative process, where we see that the cities cooperate with the local actor to define their needs. So really evidence-based needs, what are the needs, what's the solution. So the place-based approach is what we are investigating and we would like to promote in the new programming period. Because when you look at the new programming period and the proposal for MFF that was done, there is a specific objective which is about the EU closer to the cities. And that's, I think, catch the meaning of the place-based approach. When we talk about the cities, the final word I want to say is that cities are becoming a very important actor when implementing the cohesion policy, but it's not easy. First, because we ask them to work in a strategic approach. And that's what does imply to work in a strategic approach. First, there is an issue of multi-level governance. Not all issues which are related to the implementation of investment can be solved at local level. You need good coordination with all the levels. That's one dimension. Another dimension is the participative process. We know that cities, urban authorities consult stakeholders, but it's also important during the implementation to keep this momentum in order that there is ownership at the moment of implementing, succeeding in achieving the result. And then there is another issue related more to the technical issue, the capacity to really set up, to have the administrative capacity, the financing to really realize the project. That's why this discussion today is extremely important. For an overview of what the Commission is doing for cities, I invite you to look at the Europa website. Recently, with a cooperation which covers across all the Commission service, what we create is a city space, one-stop shop. What's this one-stop shop? Is an entry point where you can find all relevant information for city on all topics which are for city. And this is about the funding, it's about the knowledge, and about the legislation. Because we know that there is sharing of knowledge is important, knowing which are the network where you can participate, which are the funding. And this is the information you can find under the city page under Europa. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. Indeed, thank you. So again, some specific initiative funds, but then also a glimpse into the bigger funding that is available to steer our cities in the right direction. Just want to check whether anyone just has a specific question of clarification to Francesco before I move on to the right hand, your left-hand side of the panel. Yeah, great. And if you can keep it reasonably brief and also just say who you are and where you're from, it makes us all feel a warm glow.
Tony Zamparuti at Milieu Limited. I just wanted to ask quickly, you mentioned the third call under the Urban Innovative Actions. How many more calls will there be before the end of the programming period?
We have just, there is 3 calls which are ongoing. The 4th call, which will be about, it will be launched in October. It will cover 4 topics. Sustainable use of land and nature-based solutions, digital transition, urban poverty, and urban security. So this call is the 4th call, will be launched October, but already today, you know the topics, because we know that there is needs for time for preparation. So you can also check already in the website Urban Innovative Action what we mean by this topic. And there will be a 5th and last call that we launched in 2019, but we have to decide on the topics to cover.
Okay. Thank you very much. Does that answer your question? Great. Okay. Just a question from me. I mean, you talk about the big, cohesion funds, billions. Just interesting as you look in and see how that is being spent. Can I take heart that all that money is somehow being spent positively in shaping us towards a more sustainable future? Or are there some nightmares of things happening, I don't know, building coal power stations or a fleet of I don't know, diesel buses or something that are taking us in the wrong direction? Or actually, somehow, are these funds, they may not be called sustainability funds, but are they actually kind of quietly taking us in the right direction?
Peter, I think so. I think
is the right diplomatic answer. Yeah.
I think there are some ineligible expenditures that we cannot pay, but basically, when the cohesion policy, what is this? The cohesion policy is the financing arm of the EU policy. So through the cohesion policy, you implement the EU policy. You implement the circular economy, you implement the sustainable use of land policy. All the EU policy needs some funds, some grants, or some other scheme to be implemented. So when we discuss with the member state and the regional authority about how to implement, how to use these funds, first we follow these objectives, which are the EU objective, and second, of course, we are sure that there are a use of the funds which is in line and compliance with the policy.
All right, that's fine. Again, this is your contribution. Thank you for that. Is opening up some thoughts in my mind for a deeper conversation towards the end. But I want to bring in our other two speakers to offer some different perspectives on this financing issue. First of all, we're going to go up to the Nordic countries, up to Sweden, which has introduced a process of the Gothenburg green bonds. I was in Gothenburg 2 months ago running a big conference on circular economy. I didn't bump into a single green bond, but maybe quietly behind the scenes they are effecting finance change for a more sustainable Gothenburg to offer us an interesting insight on an approach, the good, bad, and maybe there was some ugly, I don't know. Delighted to welcome to the platform Bernt Svensson, Senior Advisor, Business Region Gothenburg in Sweden. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this introduction, and I'm very glad to be here, and also very glad that you are here. I'm the only one that is representing a city, and Gothenburg is the second city in Sweden, around 600,000 inhabitants. And you know, a city in that size has to invest a lot of money every year. And we invest around 4 billion euros every year. And we have environmental program, we have a climate program. We also just set an innovation strategy for the city, and we also have a lot of test beds. So when we put all this together, we find out that perhaps green bonds is a good solution for the city to start with. So. Oh. Yes, so I'm coming from the environmental side. I've been working with environmental and climate projects in more than 20 years. But I also found that financing is very important, because otherwise it will not happen at all. So Gothenburg was the first city in the world to issue the green bonds, and it happens in 2013. And the thinking in the background behind this, it was, are there price advantages? Can we reach more investors? Can we spread the risks? You know, normally we go to the bank and borrow some money to invest, but we tried this, and others had tried before. Companies had tried this before, but we was the first city. And we issued the first green bond, and it was for 48 million euros. So what do a city need to use this type of financing? Yeah, the first is, as I said before, an environmental program, a framework. And in Gothenburg we have both a climate program and an environmental program. And in the environmental program we have 12 objectives. And the climate program, we have to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 75% in 2050 from 2015. So that's very important to have these policies and these programs in place. Credit ratings, it helps. It helps a lot. If you have good ratings, then it's quite easy to get the investors to come. And we have ratings from both Moody's, and we have the highest rating there, AAA, and that's a very stable outlook. We also have the ratings from Standard & Poor's, and that's AA+. This is also stable outlook. And when they are looking for the ratings, they look for the predictability in economic development. They look for the dynamic local economy with stable outlook, and also the strong financial control, but also with flexibility in the budget. So this helps a lot for us. So what do we invest in? Yeah, we have these project categories. It's waste management, water management, sustainable housing is of course a big thing. Smart grids, environmental can be biodiversity, noise pollution, air pollution, energy efficiency, renewable energy like solar, wind, hydropower, biogas, and so on, biofuels, and also sustainable transportation in general. It can be for bikes, for pedestrians, or other type of public solutions. And we can use the green bonds for this. So this is the project we have been investing in. We started 2013 with 3 projects. It was a type of ultrafilter for cleaning the drinking water, because we take the drinking water from the river, and when it's raining too much, then the water will be polluted. So this is, okay, I go one. The next is go by gas, and that's a gasification project to use biomass and making it to biogas. And the third project was electric cars. And then you see we have new projects every year, and they're running over the years. You can see for electric cars also invested in the last year, 2017. So altogether, we have invested around 570 billion euros. So what are green bonds? Well, it's like normal bonds, except that proceeds are earmarked to green investments. And we track and report on the use of the proceeds to ensure it will be green compliance. And that means that we reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, or we put money in climate resilience. There's a big demand from the pension funds in Scandinavia, but I think also in Europe and in many other countries all over the world. And we support the World Bank strategy in this to introduce innovation in climate finance. And this will also help to raise awareness among the investors and the financial community, because many pension funds are looking for sustainable projects to invest in. And that's because they are coming to invest in this type of projects. We make an impact report every year. We report back on progress in the various projects funded through the green bonds. And we describe, of course, the projects in details, how much we have invested in the project, and what the environmental impact is. For example, energy savings, greenhouse emissions avoided, or other benefits. We also try to contribute to a harmonization of this impact reporting, so we can find a standard in the future. So we have worked together with other Nordic organizations just to look on the impact report, how should it be formed and what should it describe. And this is very important for the investors. They know exactly what we have done and they can rely on that. We also use an independent organization for second opinion, that what we are doing is, what we say we are doing is the right thing, that we have done it. That's very important. Yeah, the results and advantages of this. Yeah, we have issued 5 bonds during these 5 years for around 550 billion euros. And we actually found out that are a small price advantage, because we reached more investors and they found out that it has a good impact on the greenhouse gas avoided. And we also spread the risks, and that's also important. Finally, green bonds help to raise awareness at the global capital market, and in the long term, it might move the investment market into more sustainable projects and reduce the investment in fossil energy. And I think if more cities, more countries, more companies use this type of financing, we can push the market in the right direction. Yes, that's all from me.
Ben, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. just hold on there for a moment. Just again, a very interesting approach. Interested whether anyone's got questions of clarification, help understand what's going on there. Someone right at the front initially. Microphone coming faster than a green bond issue.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this. My name is Peter Gammeltoft. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. I think it's a very interesting approach. But I want, these are loans, and they have to be paid back. You have to amortize the loan, and I think Gothenburg is lucky that they have an AAA credit rating. This helps. Some of the places that need this have, and some of the places that need it most, do not have as good credit ratings as the city of Gothenburg. And I'm also wondering their fiscal consolidation policies in place across Europe, and I wonder whether you have run into some kind of wall in this context, which has set limits for how much you could actually do.
So I think there are two questions there. Would you like to respond to them?
Yeah. Well, of course, ratings are very important. But we have seen a lot of projects that have been using this type of green bonds in India, for example. So I think it's not only about these ratings. I think it's mostly about to have the program and to have the organization and all this stuff, how to handle it in a good way.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if I exactly answer your question, but...
I mean, the second one was kind of around the kind of financial regulatory frameworks, etc. Do you ever come up against problems, barriers, issues, or...?
Yeah, we work together with other organizations in Nordic countries, as I said before, and we are looking for this procedure together. How can we manage it? Just how to put up a project and how to handle the managing of the financing. We have a sub-konto for this, of course. Right. So we separate it from the other economy in the city. I think that's important. But it has been growing. We have around 14 billion Swedish crowns invested every year. Around 14% is nowadays green bonds, and it will grow.
Okay. Okay, well, we may open up the conversation a little bit further, but for now, thank you very much, Bernd, for that insight into the green bonds. That's great. Our last presentation, interesting, all these sources of money, and delighted that we're joined by Doreen Putman de Villa, who's the Senior Manager of Institutional Relations at ASN Investment Funds. Now, Dutch-based, very much into investing for social value, for sustainability. Maybe the exception to the rule, I don't know, but Doreen, great to have you with us, and interesting just from your world of finance and banking, one or two thoughts on how we enable sustainable financing of transformation in cities at scale. Great to have you with us.
Thank you. When I first sat in a meeting this morning, the very first sentence I heard was, of course, the biggest difficulty is finance. So great that you are all here to solve that problem. I am indeed working for ASN Bank and the ASN Investment Fund. We are a small bank, and we manage 200 million of the energy fund of the province of Overijssel, which is a governmental fund, and also 1.7 billion funds from private people. And in total, the whole bank manages 17 billion euros. started in 1960, and our target is in the year 2030, whatever we invest in or people who borrow from us, all the money should be CO2 neutral. And after 2030, we want to gain back CO2 from the air. So this is a very ambitious, I know, but we are already at about 75% of our ambition, which is on the good way. So a banker is really different from a EU governmental person, of course. And that's because we are believers. Yes, do you know where the word credit comes from? It comes from Latin, and credo means I believe. I believe that my money comes back to me once you have borrowed it from me. That's the whole basic principle from banking. And EU is not believing that the money comes back, because it is money often given by all the countries as their obligations to pay, and that money has to be spent. Now, the difference between spending money and investing money and providing money in order to get it back through loans or through equity, that once you want to sell your share and get your money back, that is what I would like to discuss with you. So, a bankable project is different from a project that is very good for society, very green, very good against air pollution or whatever. And our challenge, of course, is we only want to do projects that are both bankable, so our money comes back, and it doesn't do any harm to the environment. Instead, it is even improving the situation. I'm happy to hear from Maya that the EU has now also made a new focus on projects in which particularly they seek collaboration with other sources of funding, like banks. And I think that the green bonds are a bit similar to what banks do, because that money, Bernd's money, has to come back, I assure you. So we can find each other here. Now, what is the additionality? Because if a bank can finance a project, why should you need taxpayers' money? EU money, right? So we have to talk about stages. And if we learn from Francesco that he has money that is just to be given away so that you can learn, of course that money hasn't a need to come back, because the whole target is learning, getting knowledge. And when we finance, I hope we have learned enough in order to judge whether your project is bankable or not. If not, we are in trouble and we lose our rating, which is a very good thing of the green bonds of Bernd was speaking of. He already has a rating. Anybody who doesn't know what a rating is? Well, you know, the cheaper you can borrow, the better the quality must be of your portfolio. The projects that you have invested in must be very good projects. And if you have invested in a very doubtful portfolio, then you have to pay very high interest rate to the ones who have provided the money to you. Now, I learned that he has made a very good arrangement, so he pays a little to get the money so that he can do a lot with the money for project finance. When we are being approached by projects, why would it be that the projects say finance is always the dilemma, is always the trouble? Is it due to us bankers? Or is there something wrong with the projects? Yeah, well, you see, we bankers, we have the most simple profession in the world. Because you, as savers, you give us your money under management. And none of you is willing to say to me, oh, what a wonderful project you have financed with my money. I agree to get only 3/4 back, right? So our job is just to make sure that you get your money back. That's what banking is. It is a trust. But banks can do a little bit more. And what we see now in Europe is that banks also actively seek collaboration with other sources of funding, like your taxpayers' money, like EU funding. Now the secret is, what kind of money comes in first, and how can you get the biggest leverage of the free money from EU, or the cheap money from subsidized schemes, and the bank's money. And one of the big issues is standardization, and another issue is legal issues, and another issue is size. When I get a telephone call from a couple of people living in one apartment building asking me, could we get a loan because we want to put on a green roof or solar panels on our roof and we need 20,000 euros. My standard question is, look around amongst the inhabitants of your apartment buildings and ask who is very, very unsatisfied with the interest rate they get on their savings account. It's nearly nothing nowadays, right? So it is much easier to ask money from the crowd near you, provide them a nice interest rate of 4 or 5%, and finance the project. And if you go to the bank, well, I'm pretty sure there's hardly any bank in the world that is willing to go through the whole process of assessing the quality of the project for a project that is just 20,000 or 40,000 euros. It is as it is. And usually for project finance, you need 3.5 million euros in a loan in order to get us out of our chair and working for you. And that is not a shame on me or on the bankers. It is just as it is. Because the legal issues and everything you have to check and control is just too costly to do for small projects. But there is, of course, also a positive message that I would like to give you. We have heard that a technical assistance is very important, and I am very pleased to know that the EU is also subsidizing this kind of technical assistance. If you have a small project in your own city and you need advice, the thing is that someone has to pay for the advice. Even your own time, if you want to do something, even if you're a government official, you have to justify how you use your time, right? And that money that is needed to get something started must come either from a gift or from a banker who believes that in the end there will be a project that is bankable. And I give you an example of what we do in the Energy Fund. If we find a proposal not bankable because it hasn't been really worked out well, and we are not sure that we get our money back because what we call the cash flow, which is the money for the next 10 or 15 years that comes in and goes out of project, is not clear. People have not a real clue of what will be the costs and what will be the revenues. Then we need professionals to help a project work out. And so we have proposed that we will use our own money, equity money, to finance upfront in certain projects the costs that are being made to pay for professional help, or even to have discussions with people so that they get involved, so that you will have a well-developed demand. And our condition is that if the project in the end is bankable, all the costs that we have provided upfront, we have been willing to pay for it, will be capitalized in the loan. And that is a way of working together. We, of course, only do so if we really believe that it is going to be a good project. And so far we have done, I think, in the province of Overijssel, 5 projects. And in total we spent 5 times 40,000 euros. And luckily for us, they all succeeded. What we also do is we have been discussing with our shareholders in the Green Fund that we manage. And we have asked them, are you willing to increase the risk level of the fund? Because we have shown you that the risk level is rather low. All the loans that we disburse to projects are very well secured. We have either buildings or a windmill or another project that we really can trust that there is income. But in some cases there is not enough what we call equity. You're familiar probably with the idea that if you want to get something financed, you also have to bring in a little bit risk money from yourself, right? And so what we have asked our shareholders, do you agree if for 15% of the total portfolio we will also step in with a little bit of risk money? And they have. Now there are 2 sides of it. If we succeed, we can make a little bit more profit, of course, because with equity, your profits are higher than just with loans. So we have just started it, and I think that was a very good step in doing so, because it offers more opportunities to projects to get financed by us. What we really believe in is involving the whole society in green projects. Because if we add up all the schemes that we have and all the money that goes into real green projects, it is really peanuts compared to what the big financial sector is doing. And what we would like to do is direct all the time much more money, not only from our bank, but from all banks, into green projects. And the way to do that is also to offer people who have little savings or a little bit of money that they would like to put into a fund so that they can become a small shareholder. And we would like to stimulate this so that people really feel that they belong to the whole process of greening the world. And do I still have the time for this?
No, you don't.
No? Okay. Then
but it's a fascinating insight.
Then if you want to know about this later, you can ask a question. And
brilliant.
Then I will finish here. Thank you.
Doreen, thank you very much indeed for some very good sound sense. So there we are. We've got 4 very interesting windows on the issue of sustainable finance. We've got just about 20 minutes to open up a little bit of broader conversation, maybe driven by interests, concerns, ideas that you've got. I wonder, just before that, I'm aware that within the European Commission there's a lot of work going on about trying to create the right playing field that enables financing of sustainability action in cities. A lot of work is going on. Julian, we're joined by Julian McLachlan, who's from the Green Finance Unit, or Green Finance and Economic Analysis Unit. And I think there's a exciting, well, if anything in this arena can be termed exciting, but an important kind of strategy and action plan that is kind of going through at the moment. I wonder if you just want to share a couple of words about why we should be holding our breath for tomorrow.
Yes, indeed.
Do you want to stand up and smile to the world?
Thank you, Peter. Yes, indeed. We've at DG Environment, we've been working a lot with DG FISMA in recent months. We've come up with this action plan on sustainable finance. So I think it's very interesting what well, everything that Doreen said was interesting from my part, but her last few words saying we don't need to get just one front-running bank getting a bit of money into the sustainable projects, we need all the banks and all the financial institutions involved. And I think that's the ambition behind this action plan on sustainable finance. It comes from the Capital Markets Union, so we're focusing more on the private finance side. We're trying to get the whole financial sector involved and get them also to play a role in this transformation. So I think, I mean, this is not to say, I think private and public, it's very interesting, this panel, because private and public finance are very complementary. At some point it was said that, Doreen said that she had heard, oh, well, the biggest difficulty is finance. But when I go to the meetings with financials, they always say, well, the money's there, the money's not the problem. The problem is finding the projects. So there's this kind of gap, and I think it can usefully be filled in. These are kind of higher risk projects, but maybe greener, and that's where the learning comes in. That's where public funds are really useful. But just to give you a brief overview of the action plan. So how is the Commission going to involve the financial sector? One of the key actions of this action plan is to develop a taxonomy, which is a classification system for defining which economic activities are green and which are not. And because this will help in transparency and reporting, it's expected to mobilize capital flows from the big institutional investors, so pension funds, asset managers, etc. Another way, I mean, and linking to this taxonomy are, for example, standards and labels. You have standards on green bonds, for example. I might ask also Bernd his opinion on what he thinks of this. The European Commission is setting up a technical expert group that one of its tasks is to develop standards for green bonds. There might also be labels for green funds. If I'm a retail investor, I go to my bank and I say, I want to invest in a green fund. My banker can say, yes, I've got all these products, but how do I make sure that they're actually really green? How can I trust the banker? And this is where you can have a certification process going on. So that's one of the other ideas. And quite importantly, something that applies across the board to all institutional investors is the notion of fiduciary duty. That is, if I'm an institutional investor and I get money, I have to handle someone's money, I have to act in the best interest of that person. Now, until recently, the best interest meant basically short-term profit maximization. And what's being introduced is the idea that the best interests might actually also include sustainability, a sustainability component. So we talk about ESG factors, environmental, social, and governance factor. Now, we expect to have adopted by tomorrow a whole package of legislative proposals to follow up on this action plan, include on taxonomy, etc., on taxonomy and fiduciary duty, and so. We really believe that this will there's been a lot of momentum within the financial system as well, a lot of attention from them, and we really believe that this will help to mobilize the capital flows towards sustainable. Yep.
Julian, exciting. So if we see you walking around with a bottle of champagne tomorrow, we'll know it's gone through and been approved. Indeed. So that's fine. Indeed. Okay, so not 4 but 5 pearls of thought and hope around the whole world of sustainable or financing transformation towards sustainable cities. In the time remaining, I'd like to throw this session to yourselves. If you've got a burning question, a thought, a desire, something that's frustrating you, a dream, this is your moment, and we'll do our best either to say great idea or we'll come up with a response. And again, just your name and a short thought would be great. Yes, in the center here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samuel Sonk. I work for Enabel, which is the Belgian Development Agency. And I'd like to start by a small assumption. I think that here in this room, there should be about 3 people out of 4 whose income comes from public money. And in pursuing from that, I'm a bit surprised that we spoke so much about bonds, about equities, about loans, and we didn't really spoke about tax, but there are two funny figures which are good to put in front, one from each other. The first is the amount of tax evasion, which from one country to the other amounts between 2% and 5% for the GDP.
Okay.
The second is the total amount which comes from the Stern report, which was issued in 2006, and which states that 1% of the global GDP should be invested for both mitigation and adaptation actions for climate. And so I'm a bit wondering whether we should so extensively focus about private money and not more on public money.
Okay.
So I'd like to have your opinion about that. Thank you.
That's fine. That sounds like an interesting thought that will float in the room. I don't know whether any of our panel feels that they want to respond to it, or else it just sits as an important indicator of some of the challenges we face. I think it sits, and maybe just interestingly, did you want? Oh, I thought you were going to. Interesting developing from that. I mean, the whole issue of the taxes we do collect and that we do spend. What is it? Something like there's €2 trillion worth of European spend. Okay, so that's our money, public money. The question is. Should not all of that, or a large proportion of that, be part of that drive towards spending on the right thing, towards taking us to a more sustainable future? So there are huge programs around, used to be called green procurement, it then became sustainable procurement. I think it's now morphed into strategic procurement that says every pound or euro or crown or whatever that is spent, that is public money, ought to be driving us towards the transformation. But it's interesting how many barriers and how difficult that is. Do you want to either comment or add on to that point? Nice and close.
I couldn't, because I don't remember exactly what is the proposal, but I remember that when the Commission presented a new perspective for the 2021-2027, there is a chapter dedicated to the revenues, about the taxes. Yeah. And there is something, I don't remember exactly, there is some proposal about some green taxes related to the things that you were saying. Can we collect some revenue direct at EU level that we can use for the environmental issue that we want to face and invest in the next future?
Okay, okay. Just if anyone's interested in the green strategic or sustainable procurement world, I'm facilitating a conference in Nijmegen, which is the European Green Capital this year, I think in October, 3-day conference about sustainable procurement. How can cities harness their spend in the what we would call the right direction. So there are conversations happening there because there are barriers and challenges as well as ways of doing it. I have another question towards the front. I'll try to go to fresh people, if any of us are left fresh in the room. Yes.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for the presentation. My name is Daniele Sensaron. I work at the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I think, well, just a very short parenthesis, we have our own approach to green cities. It's what we call the Green Cities Framework, which we have developed over the few last years and implemented through also cooperation with the Commission. I have a question for Maya and Francesco, given that there's a lot, as Maya was saying, there's, I mean, the grants will not be sufficient, and this is something that we've been saying all day. At the same time, in the context of the next MFF and the increasing use of financial instruments that it's planned to be put on the table for the next MFF, I just wanted to ask if there's any plan in terms of use of financial instruments, including blending and guarantee, for the LIFE program in particular, a bit along the same lines of what the Commission is already doing in the external sector with the with the external investment plan, under which the guarantee is actually used to allow more risky investments that international financial institutions or other institutions can promote because the Commission covered the risk.
Okay, Maya.
Yes, thank you. It's actually a very interesting question. As for the current financial perspective, there are already elements in the LIFE regulation that allow a similar mechanism. We call it private finance for energy efficiency, and basically what it does, it combines lending from EIB to financial intermediaries with protection against losses associated with making investments in energy efficiency projects. So we have this kind of element in life. As for the future, I must admit that I don't recall the details of the new proposal, with this regard. But indeed, the new proposal has been announced by the Commission, and now it's up for the discussion with the Member States and the European Parliament. So the final shape is not yet clear. It probably will be established in the next couple of months.
Yes, please.
Well, I know that in the Netherlands, the Netherlands Investment Agency, it's a governmental body, is now starting to set up a fund, which is a guarantee fund, and that's for all pension funds and banks who would like to invest in the renovation of existing buildings, because the cash flow from those renovations is not the same as a mortgage loan, and you don't have the normal securities, of course. You can't sell the properties when you don't get paid, but we assume, and that has been calculated, that the premium is really very, very low. So in the beginning, we will ask all the cities to add money and into the fund, and then later maybe also the banks would like to take a part in the raising of the fund. But we can have a leverage of maybe 98%, which is really very good.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Francesca.
Indeed, this blending of different funds is something that has been announced in the MFA will take place. So if I could say what's the role of the public, what is the role of the private, definitely the public sector, we always take the risky part. So as it was today, the risky part of investment on one side. On the other, what we can continue to do is to work on the technical assistance, the administrative capacity, which is really necessary to have a project of maturity. So that's the things that we are doing, we are learning, and the beneficiaries of the EU funds, not only of the cohesion policy, are learning, and they will continue in the future.
Right. Okay, thank you. Time for a couple more questions. I may come to the front in a moment. I'm going to come to the front.
Okay, maybe it's a bit coming back to what I raised before, but I mean, we've heard a lot about putting finance on stream, and I think, you know, these propositions are very interesting. If you want to finance on a big scale, then, you know, I think proposals about leverage, proposals about bringing in long-term investment and so on is hugely interesting. But there's also, I mean, we've also heard about the need for bankability of projects, and bankability basically means that the money will come back to the people who put the money in. Now, I think it's easier if we speak in a more concrete manner about this. OECD has developed for water infrastructure a concept, you know, that there are basically three sources of paying back loans for water infrastructure, and it's transfers, tariffs, transfers, taxes, and tariffs. Transfers we have in the EU. For countries that I think have less than 75% of the GDP can get quite a lot of transfer through the EU budget, which is, of course, at the end of the day, is taxpayers' money going into cohesion funds, through cohesion funds to to member states. But if you do not qualify for that, what's left are taxes and charges. Now, if you build a wastewater plant, it's very easy to see who to charge, because who are the beneficiaries? They're the people who are linked to the wastewater treatment system. This is not so easy. If you look at, for example, re-establishing floodplains in the upper Danube to protect Serbia from flood risks. This raises a whole host of questions of how the hell are you going to claw back the money? Are you going to ask the Serbians to pay? Everybody is basically the beneficiary of this, and this normally means taxes. And well, we all know what the situation is about raising taxes. It's not the most popular thing on the agenda at the moment. So, I think there's a real issue here. Once we have the finance on stream, there's a real issue of thinking. I think more thinking is needed about how to make the projects bankable. How do you create a stream of income that is able to pay for these loans? Because these loans will not happen if there is not, Doreen said this very clearly. This will not happen if there is no stream of income. It raises all sorts of governance issues. It raises all sorts of issues about fiscal consolidation. When you look at this in the longer term, discount rates and all sorts of niceties that we don't need to get into here.
And if you were to point the finger at somebody who ought to be doing something, who would it be? Don't give the microphone. It's coming back to you. That's it.
Well, I basically think the government bodies need
national
and European governments need to think about this, because national governments and the European institutions have taken responsibility, for example, for implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. This is, at the end of the day, a question of political management. And the political managers, in my view, have to think about this, how to make it happen.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe some of the work that's going on is around that issues, but thank you very much. You can, but only as a final message, we are almost out of time. You can either react to that, but I just want a kind of sentence and a half, but no more. If there were one message you would like to leave with us as we grapple with the issue of sustainable finance and we straighten our ties ready to go for the Life Awards ceremony at 6:30, what would that final message that maybe gives us a sense of moving forwards be? So I'm going to come first of all to you, Maya. Give us a one-liner message to take us out with a spring in our step.
You caught me a bit off guard.
That's why you're a senior civil servant able to respond to this challenge.
But so I would like to build then a bit on what Doreen has said about bankers being dreamers. Well, the EU civil servants are also believers. Well,
there are no dreamers in the banking sector. They dream of how to spend it.
Well, the EU civil servants are both, believers and dreamers. And even though the challenge that we all collectively facing, not just in the cities, but everywhere, is huge, I believe we can do it if we work together. It's a private sector, public sector, non-governmental sector, and also with the involvement of the citizens, because at the end of the day, it's everyone's concern.
This is the moment. Francesco.
I think that we can trust and empower the local authorities to take initiative and cooperate with stakeholders, so to let that they define the solution that it really needs. And this is not a dream. I saw it. I was last week in Lille, where I saw one project that we financed for urban poverty, not your issues, but what we saw that in the same area, because we invest, other private sector came and invest on the same area for their own business. So the local level, working with the private, with all the energies which are in present, can really produce something positive that can be used for attracting private investment.
Okay.
Yeah, if we will save the planet, and we will have the climate as it is in any way right now, then we have to use all these types of fundings. It has to be bankable. We can use green bonds, which also is bankable in any way. But we also need fundings, both from EU and from the government, and we also need the funds from life, of course. We have to combine.
Okay, and a final word from you, Doreen.
Well, I would say keep looking for and finding new people. I love the way you introduced everybody to each other, because now we have already new contacts, and only we can solve the problems if we discover new partners in crime, not in crime. But for you, for instance, insurance companies can have a hell of a benefit out better flooding arrangements and so on. So these are potential partners who shouldn't be free riders. And we all know people. So networking and discovering what others do is, I think, the most important thing that we have to do right now in this conference.
Okay, thank you very much. My parting comment is, apart from, wow, fascinating conversation, is I was at a conference last week in Canada talking about ICT for sustainability and all these programs, and someone just came up with a simple phrase saying, the social carries the environmental. And if we look at cities, fundamentally they are social organisms. That's where the political interest in, and maybe, because I've heard about green bonds and green projects, maybe the city is itself, in a sense, an environmental sustainability project program, but it's fundamentally a people program, and maybe that's a shift of part of our thinking that could inform how we engage with those that fund transformation. Could I say a huge thank you to you for all joining us in this session. We hope we've learned something, or at least made a new contact. But most of all, could I thank the organisers of this session, the Commission for putting the whole show on, our translators for sitting in high-degree cabins, smiling all the way through, but most of all to our 4 speakers for offering fascinating interventions. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. Go forth, relax, and we'll see you in at the awards ceremony at 6:30.